members and the majority to please rise to the occasion. His Excellency Noble Nisi the Bar Emil of Ben Emmanuel presiding grand jury. Court is in session.
All right. Gotta excuse me. Thank you, Mrs. Hollingsworth. So, what brings us here today is the sentencing for reparations. All right. And what I'm going to do here is read the final case and sentencing for reparations. So let me set this up here. All right, another case for reparations. A heavy account lies against us as a civil society for oppressions committed against people who did not injure us. And that if the particular case of many individuals were fairly stated, it would appear that there was considerable due to them. That's a quote from Quaker John Woolman from 1769. The United States, what many consider the greatest democracy in history, continues to fight a war that began before Jamestown's founding in 1619. Historians argue that the Spanish brought African slaves to Florida as early as 1526. As did Sir Francis Drake in the first attempted English colony at Roanoke Island in 1586. Groups like the Quakers in New York, New England, and Baltimore called for the abolition of slavery as early as 1688, citing Matthew 7, verse 12, or the Golden Rule, and asking, is there any that would be sold or made a slave for all the time of his life? So according to biblical law, you're only allowed to own slaves for 7 years and then give him an opportunity to go free. If he chooses to stay with you, then he shall remain a slave for another 7 years. There is a saying that we shall do to all men as we will be done ourselves, end quote. The tradition of slavery, specifically Africans, is rooted deep in the heart of the country. Most of America's early presidents between 1789 to 1850 were slave owners, including Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Jackson, Van Buren, Harrison, Tyler, and Polk. Only John Adams and his son, John Quincy Adams, are omitted from the list, according to Britannica. Other prominent Americans who owned African slaves were Samuel Chase, Benjamin Franklin, John Hancock, John Jay, and Patrick Henry. Slavery apologists attempt to fantasize. This is pre-Civil War now. Slavery apologists attempt to fantasize and whitewash the average slave's conditions, citing benign slave owners' kindness and claiming that only a few in the white population were complicit. In their view, the Civil War arose from the federal government's attempt to override state rights, not to end slavery. They accused dawn to sunset work as common among all. I think maybe they should be reading with me, so let me share my screen here. Slaves and free farmers, the existence of large free Black populations in the South, and a vibrant social and cultural life in their quarters beyond slave owners' reach. And we can find that in the Library of Congress under pre-Civil War African American slavery. An objective view of the facts quickly disproves such delusions. Black slaves were considered property, typically lived in crude quarters with inadequate nutrition and unrelenting hard labor. Yes, Amadou. Feel free to interrupt at any time. Please unmute your mic. Unmute Yahuda.
You know, I was just saying hi. Shalom, shalom.
Shalom, bro. Okay. So, an objective view of the facts quickly disproves such delusions. Black slaves were considered property, typically lived in crude quarters with inadequate nutrition and unrelenting hard labor. Families were subject to separation, women to rape with men being helpless to intervene, and severe punishments, whippings, torture, which is the saddest, has to be the saddest part. I mean, when you read about the tortures, mutilation, even murder for all ages. Each state had a slave code. You can find the slave codes at pbs.org. Conditions of antebellum slavery that prohibited their testimony in court against a white, make contracts, leave the plantation without permission, strike a white, even in self-defense, buy and sell goods, own firearms, gather without a white present, possess any anti-slavery literature, or visit the homes of whites or free Blacks. Killing a slave was rarely considered murder, nor the rape of slave women a crime. Slave ownership was common in the South, according to the 1860 census. We can find it at census.gov, the 1860 census at census.gov. In his book, 1861, The Civil War Awakening, historian Adam Goodhart, the number of slave owners was understated, as many non-slaveholding whites in the South rented slaves from wealthier slaveholders. So slaves were not only purchased, but they were rented. White Southerners were more likely to be a slave master, but not technically a slave owner. Those who could not afford slaves supported slavery, working with the hope that they would someday make enough to buy their own. John Wilkes Booth, the assassin of Lincoln, wrote, quote, "I, for one, have ever considered it," meaning slavery, one of the greatest blessings for themselves and us that God ever bestowed on a favored nation. End quote. There were 3,953,760 slaves in the U.S. that year, or 12.6% of the total population. About 1 in 4 households owned slaves, including almost 50% of families in Mississippi and North Carolina. In 1860, there were more millionaires per capita in the Mississippi Valley than anywhere else in the country. Northern banks did insure slaves. Slaveholders also took out mortgages on a broad scale, and slaves as property were estimated at a value of approximately $4 billion in 1860. That is equivalent to $1.9 trillion today in 1920 as a financial asset. It was the largest financial asset in the American economy by far, larger than all the manufacturing and railroad companies put together. David W. Blight, Pulitzer Prize winner and professor of history at Yale University, during his interview on Court TV News, November 14th, 2007. That's what he said. Ta-Nehisi Coates, the author of The Case for Reparations. So in this expose, we are taking the baton and utilizing the final case and sentencing for reparations. He's a journalist for The Atlantic, and in June 2014, he writes that the destruction of Black families during slavery as, quote, a kind of murder. Here we find the roots of American wealth and democracy in the for-profit destruction of the most important asset available to any people, the family. The destruction was not incidental to America's rise. It facilitated America's rise. By erecting a slave society, America created the economic foundation for its great experiment in democracy, end quote. So after the Civil War, Americans rightly applauded the abolition of slavery. The Emancipation Proclamation, January 1st, 1863. And the war's subsequent end. Still, few were willing to redress or make right the wrongs committed over the 2 centuries, 200 years, against Black people. Following a brief effort, Reconstruction period 1865 to 1877, to provide the same rights to the former slaves enjoyed by white people, overt discrimination, exploitation, and segregation became the norm, especially in the former Confederate states. Lincoln, though admired for the emancipation, was not prepared to give the new Black citizens full rights. In a presidential debate with Stephen Douglas in 1858, he pronounced, quote, I will say then that I am not, nor ever have been, in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and Black races. So the applause erupted. You see? That I am not, nor ever have been in favor of making voters or jurors of Negroes, nor of qualifying them to hold office, nor to intermarry with white people. And I will say, in addition to this, that there is a physical difference between the white and Black races, which I believe will forever forbid the 2 races living together on terms of social and political equality. And inasmuch as they cannot so live, while they do remain together, there must be the position of superior and inferior. And I, as much as any other man, am in favor of having the superior position assigned to the white race. End quote. So we understand. Following the 1867 Reconstruction Act's passage, Blacks voted in large numbers and elected African Americans in communities throughout the South, an accomplishment much resented by the white people previously in power. The resentment simmered for at least 80 years. E. Merton Coulter, a founding member of the Southern Historical Association and chair of the history department at the University of Georgia, writing in 1947, described Reconstruction efforts with a, quote, glimmering resemblance to the later cults of fascism and Nazism, end quote. He claimed the period of Black office holding was the, quote, longest to be remembered, shuddered at, and execrated, end quote. Since the end of the Civil War, African Americans have experienced constant social, economic, and political efforts by the white power structure to keep them in a subordinate position and limit their opportunities to occupy a seat at the table of freedom. From the terrorism of the Ku Klux Klan to the bombings of churches, Jim Crow laws and poll taxes, lynching to extensive incarcerations, people of color have suffered from the outright racism of the few and the indifference of the many. The federal government and its three branches have failed to protect all of its citizens, lending credence to Booth's claim that, quote, this country was formed for the white, not for the black man, end quote. Federal and state governments supported segregation for decades, even in the armed forces, where white and black men fought side by side, but could not share a meal in the South until 1963. The Supreme Court's 1896 Plessy versus Ferguson decision, separate but equal, remained in place more than 1/2 century until overturned by Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954. Even then, James Meredith had to be protected by federal troops trying to enroll in the University of Mississippi in 1962. And the Associated Press reported that schools in Cleveland, Mississippi remained segregated until 2017. Mississippi remained segregated until 2017. Okay, quote, Black families making $100,000 a year typically live in the kinds of neighborhoods inhabited by white families making $30,000 a year. It is not possible to compare the economic outcomes of Black and white children. Sociologist, end quote, sociologist Patrick Sharkey, from a lecture that he held in February 27, 2015. Blacks are 2/3 more likely to work at or below poverty level wages than whites, less likely to own a home, and have a net worth 1/10 of the average white person. Federal home ownership programs used redlining and accepted restrictive covenants, forbidding a home sale to anyone other than a white. Between 1924 and 1950, the National Association of Real Estate Boards Ethical Code warned that a realtor should never be instrumental in introducing into a neighborhood any race or nationality or any individuals whose presence will clearly be detrimental to property values. Black farm owners lost 6 million acres of land in the South from 1950 to 1969. We need that back. Almost disappearing under the United States Department of Agriculture's auspices. Van Newkirk II of the Atlantic magazine writes, quote, major audits and investigations of the USDA have found that illegal pressures levied through its loan programs created massive transfers of wealth from Black to white farmers, especially in the period just after the 1950s. In 1965, the United States Commission on Civil Rights found that in a sample of counties across the South, the FMHA provided much larger loans for small and medium-sized white-owned farms relative to net worth than it did for similarly sized Black-owned farms. Evidence that racial discrimination, quote, has served to accelerate the displacement and impoverishment of the Negro farmer, end quote. At the time of World War I, there were 1 million Black farmers, and in 1992, there were 18,000 Black farmers. With the turn of the 21st century, a growing number of white Americans, especially the young, recognized the carnage experienced by African Americans from the immoral and illegal acts that began with slavery and continue today. Coates notes that Black people have repeatedly paid a high price for citizenship and received little in return. A call for atonement, the need for reparations. Few moral Americans attempt to dispute the evil of slavery or its corrosive effects that have continued to affect the country. According to Reverend William J. Barber II, the United States is facing a national crisis that is, in many ways, an intensifying of the storm that rocked America in 1968. He questions whether we have the moral capacity to face what ails society. How can America address the wrongs in which it has encouraged, endorsed, and participated? The Declaration of Independence speaks of unalienable rights endowed by our Creator. While we are expressly a secular nation, the religious writings of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam recognize and require atonement to address wrongs. David Sweet, writing in the Yale Law Journal, notes that civil and criminal law customarily demands atonement for its breach, not merely the repayment of an outstanding debt, but the complete restoration of the pre-existing relationship. Richard Posner's economic analysis of law suggests that we, the society at large, should extract repayment from those who have perpetrated the harm. The United States Senate formally apologized to millions of Black Americans forcibly brought to the country and lost their freedom to build riches for the country on June 18, 2009. However, the apology contains a specific disclaimer that nothing in this resolution authorizes or supports any claim against the United States. Some would characterize the apology like a jury finding a verdict of murder and setting the guilty murderer free. Are apologies hollow when there is no effort to correct the injustice? 9 states, Alabama, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, Maryland, New Jersey, North Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, have also made official apologies. Several businesses, universities, and the Southern Baptist Convention have also made public apologies, the first stage of atonement. Some institutions have given or pledged reparations to the descendants of slaves, including the state of Florida, the city of Chicago, Georgetown University, and multiple religious seminaries. There have been improvements in the treatment of African Americans, especially in the last half century. The progress is evidence of the nation's acceptance of the wrongs, if not an admission of guilt. But more, much more, is needed than words. Coates likes America's position as that of a person after running up credit card debt, having pledged to charge no more, but unclear why the balance of the card doesn't disappear. In fact, it accrues interest. The effects of that balance, the accumulated wrongs inflicted on African Americans, interest accruing daily, are all around us, end quote from Ta-Nehisi quotes. The prophet. Reparations in modern times. The most notable example of reparations in modern times is the multiple payments made to the Jewish people for the Holocaust atrocities. Despite the commonly held belief that the United States does not pay reparations, there are numerous examples of payments in the past, including Native Americans. In 1946, President Harry Truman signed legislation establishing the Indian Claims Commission that subsequently awarded $1.3 billion to 176 tribes and bands, who are all independent nations within this landmass. An apology for the treatment did not occur until 2009, 63 years later. Native Hawaiians, the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act of 1920 established a land trust for Native Hawaiians, allowing people of one-half Hawaiian ancestry to lease homesteads from the federal government for 99 years at a time for $1. That's a pretty good deal. That's what they received. The apology for the treatment did not come until 1993. 73 years later, Japanese internees, due to racial prejudice, 120,000 Japanese Americans were moved to detention camps on the West Coast and held between 1942 and 1945. The Civil Liberties Act of 1988 officially apologized for the action and awarded $20,000 to every survivor. Close to 40 years later, 43 years later. So we want you guys to do it in reverse. Even though you've already apologized, you're doing it in reverse. You haven't paid Black people reparations whatsoever, and it needs to happen. Medical experiment survivors. Known as the Tuskegee experiments in 1932, 600 Black men were deliberately untreated to observe the long-term effects of syphilis. Prodded by a class action lawsuit, the government awarded the victims $10 million, healthcare and burial services for the men, and healthcare and other services to their spouses and descendants. The apology followed in 1997, 65 years later, by President Billy Clinton. Final thoughts. The time has come for Americans to redress the damage done to a significant percentage of its citizens. Black citizens represent more than 1 in 8 Americans today. They have suffered for more than 3 centuries for the wrongs perpetrated on them. The guilt of the American government acting on behalf of the citizenry is incontestable and widely acknowledged. The need for reparations to victims is morally and legally required and has historical precedent. The only remaining questions are how much compensation is needed, in what form, and who best manages its distribution to ensure the victims receive justice. America is not merely another heartless corporation who could care less about the lives not exclusive to human life they impact. America is a slow repenting government who has cured multiple disasters, both foreign and domestic. That concludes the opening. Any thoughts?
Greetings.
Greetings.
I think the statement was very good, and I think it hit a lot of points. But one thing I do want to make sure that we look at is the idea of reparations, which is repairing. Um, uh, it can only really be achieved with the elimination of debt of all African people worldwide. Um, and not just the debt, but I think we talked about the moral, political, social, spiritual, and economic um, pains that have impacted all African people worldwide. So I think when we talk about reparations, we really are going to have to talk about the elimination of all debt starting off of uh, of all Africans, both in Africa, outside of Africa. Haiti continues to pay a debt to France. Colonies that are supposed to be independent continue to have to pay through the French banking system. Those under the British Commonwealth continue to have to pay tribute to the crown. So I think we have to talk about uh, Pan-African unity when we talk about reparations, and it has to include, one, the elimination of all World Bank and IMF loans and any other colonial debt that's held against Africa and those territories outside of Africa. And then I think we need to also talk about including our people from the continent and the Caribbean, because what is happening to Haiti is a striking symbol of what's happening to them. So if we consider, these territories all imperialist illegal territories, and our revolutions have been connected to Haiti revolutions and vice versa, we have to talk about the reparation and the restoration of territories outside of Africa as well, a part of that diaspora. So Haiti and the Caribbean, all debt must be eliminated and reparations paid with interest. All treasures, all indigenous art, traditional statues, burial remains, and all artifacts that are stolen, not only from Africa, from the Caribbean, but also cultural theft that has happened to African people in the arts, in the sciences,
Mhm.
in education. We have to talk about, they talk about patents. They patent everything, but what they didn't patent is what they stole from African people. And we actually change the language. They add new words every year in America, and most of those words or slang, what they call slang, or statements that African people created, and they use that as marketing. Even as they talk about the
Absolutely.
tributes to the notorious RBG, it's an insult to hear that when in fact the red, the black, and the green stands as a part of our symbol of revolutionary unity and liberation. And they denigrated Biggie when he was alive, but yet they want to use the symbol of the notorious RBG, like the notorious BIG, to popularize their decrepit and criminal system and to give some kind of credence and credibility to try to lull in our people into their capitalist undemocratic system. And again, this is just a part of the cultural expropriation that has been used to separate and divide us. So we have to also talk about how do we repair and get reparations from that kind of system? How do we deal with that? We have to talk about not just that, but the violence against our people. Uh, can they really repair as they pay $12 million to Breonna Taylor's family? And certainly we know that these payments cannot replace Breonna Taylor's life and her future life and the children that she would have had and the contribution that she would have made to her family and the community. It can't possibly pay that. But the reality is taxpayers pay that. That money doesn't come out of the pockets of these white cracker policemen that did the assassination. That comes out of the city or the state coffers, and it's the taxpayers, again, once again, African people who are paying taxes have to pay that. So we are paying for our own killing. And that has happened for decades. How do we get that back? So what we have to talk about is that system of justice is really injustice. Any reparations has to destroy that type of system. This whole policing system has to be destroyed. The whole judicial system has to be destroyed and rebuilt. The economic system that makes us work, in fact, our labor has been stolen for over 400 years, not only in America, in the Caribbean, and in Africa. Our land was stolen. We were denied land. If you add interest to that, how can we get that back? What does that look like? Throughout the territories, we have to talk about the theft of education, the lack and the denial of education, the denial of housing, the denial of medical care, the denial of interaction within the system to have businesses. There are people who come from all over the world and who are able in less than a generation to establish businesses all throughout our community and theirs, have their own banks, establish a whole marketing campaign and system, and be able to be fully integrated into the society here in capitalist, colonialist America, but deny Africans the ability to hardly have anything. How do we gain reparations for that? For all of us who are languishing in the prison industrial complex, that are still laboring for free, that are still, our wombs are being stolen in hysterectomies. I mean, we talk about Tuskegee, they haven't stopped experimenting on
That's
us
a fact.
and
That's a
stealing
fact.
from us. How do we get reparations? It is literally impossible for them to pay us, but we must still demand all of that. And so the debt with interest is going to, in a sense, not only for America, but for all, because they're all in cahoots. For Britain, for France, for Portugal, for Spain, for Germany, for Italy, they all owe because they all benefit, including Belgium when we talk about the Congo. They all owe. So, in essence, let us be honest to say that we must demand it all. And if it means the destruction of capitalism, well, the reality is the birth of capitalism came out of slavery. And so the only peace we can have is the death of capitalism and the development of a socialist society. So we must fulfill our ancestors' cries, our ancestors' lives, their struggle and their fight by demanding the destruction of capitalism, the destruction of all these capitalist colonialist societies, all these imperialist societies must fall, deplete their resources, and help restore Africa and African people throughout the world for whatever.
Whoa. That was amazing. Okay. So you made me switch the agenda around because that's a perfect segue into the compensation that we demand. Now, as far as duplicating our efforts in every country, we're working on that. Okay. So everyone has to say the same thing at the same time and focus on somebody saying something here. Somebody trying to speak. Okay. So as far as duplicating our efforts, we're working on that. And so we have to say the same things at the same time in order to focus our efforts. Everybody has to be having this conversation simultaneously and loudly. And so we have to recruit the artists. We have to recruit the people that have large audiences in order to make this loud enough to coerce, lovingly coerce the politicians who have shown remorse, but they don't know how to pay these things. So there's only one bank. When you say they're the World Bank, right? They are already bankrupt. We put them in bankruptcy in 2015. And they were not too big to fail, so they had to restructure. So now there's a new World Bank. The only bank in the earth who can afford to pay reparations to every country, to the indigenous of every country. So let me go into the clear list of compensation, right? So it was updated on September the 4th in order to coincide with the recommendations of the mayors. Okay, so this meme says, Black Lives Matter. Do Black police lives matter? No. No. Do Black conservative lives matter? No. Do Black Chicago victims' lives matter? No. Do unborn Black lives matter? No. Do Black small business owners matter? No. So which Black lives matter? The criminals shot by the police. Now, I don't know how this meme had the gall to call people criminals, but they make a valid point. Okay, so everyone is innocent until proven guilty. Okay. So if they were shot by Judge Dredd, you see, there was once upon a time, police were inspired by Batman. And Batman never killed any of the alleged criminals that he would apprehend. But upon the release of Judge Dredd 1 and 2, which is their military army, right? The media and especially the silver screen is their military, is a part of their military to brainwash people and cause them to act certain ways. So when they released Judge Dredd 1 and 2, that inspired a whole generation of police officers to decide for themselves who deserves to die on a traffic stop. I'm digressing because I don't want to get excited. So I want to read the clear list of compensation. So now, which one of you, I need participation on this. Who remembers when Black Lives Matter blew, no pun intended, a platinum opportunity to tell Hillary Clinton what they want? That's a question. I forgot to put the question mark. I need participation on this. Does anybody remember that? Well, Praise Salvation remembers. So there was a video that went super duper viral wherein Black Lives Matter had the opportunity to tell Hillary Clinton very clearly what they want. And even though she lost the election, it was still an opportunity to have it published and viralized. So, play that. Let me stop sharing my screen for a moment here so that I may add the computer sound to it. There we go. Now listen to this.
I think that there has to be a reckoning. I agree with that.
America's first drug is free Black labor and turning Black bodies into profit. And the mass incarceration system mirrors an awful lot like the prison plantation system. It's the same. It's a similar thread.
Your analysis is totally fair. It's historically fair, it's psychologically fair, it's economically fair. But you're going to have to come together as a movement and say, here's what we want done about it.
But like what I'm saying is what you just said was a form of victim blaming. Right? You were saying that what the Black Lives Matter movement needs to do to change white hearts is...
No, I'm not talking about... Look, I don't believe you change hearts. I believe you change laws, you change allocation of resources, you change the way systems operate. You're not going to change every heart. You're not.
Okay, so if you're as astute as body language as I am, you would realize that she was very shocked that she dropped a whole diamond in the man's lap, saying that, what do you want? And tell us. And he took that as an insult. You understand? He took that as an insult. So now I took it as a platinum opportunity, right? Platinum opportunity to lay out what we want. You understand? So how can we forget? Instead of banging on power in that moment, Black Lives Matter should have outlined the Harvest Freedom Act for reparations to African Americans and autochthonous. Here are our demands, all tied for number one in order of importance. So if you have any demands, comment below our demands. And Ms. Pampelli clearly demonstrated multiple demands. Let me get back here. Okay. So what we want is very simple. We want a total of 88, we want a total of 88 refuge cities and 40 embassies. These cities, each city will have 172,000 acres per city per state. That's a total of 8,256,000 acres total. So as we read in the previous blog, Black farmers lost 6 million acres. So we think that's fair. This 8,256,000 acres is the size of a very, very small county in every state. Is that super clear? Feel free to interrupt at any time to discuss any of these sentencings. We have found them guilty. And this is a sentencing hearing. I invited the defense to the sentencing hearing in order to weigh in on the severity of their sentencing. So without objection, we are announcing the sentencing to them. Number two, 6.203 quadrillion dollars. This is why we updated this blog, because the cities recommended that amount. One-time tax-exempt payment to administer payments incorruptibly to the applicants/beneficiaries. Number three, moratorium on abortion. As Ms. Pampelli clearly stated, that they utilize our organs on the black market to examine disproportionate black genocide. Number four, we're going to replace the Social Security number. Anybody that applies with us and receives a check with us, we're going to replace the Social Security number with our own indexing /ID. Number five, identity revelation. By popular demand, the people we polled wanted a full disclosure report and promote our stolen and erased identity. They wanted a full disclosure because they realized that when they kidnapped these people from their locations, that they knew who these people were and documented it. So the people want a full disclosure of who these people are. Number 6, moratorium on effects of Satanists in the society. Number 7, 10+ new holidays and memorials. As we designate. Number 8, restore all indigenous sacred sites and grounds to our ownership. That includes Mount Rushmore, which Donald Trump doubled down on and went there to have a rally without the permission of the great Sioux Nation. They need to pass H.R. 40, which is a reparations study, and other. Number 10, they need to pass H.R. 3557, which is the REAP Act of 2013. Number 11, they need to pass H.R. 1042, calling on the Senate, to rename the Russell Senate Office Building to Benjamin Banneker State Senate Office Building. Russell, the man that they named it after, is 100% traitor to the United States. Benjamin Banneker designed Washington, D.C. and never traded on the country. They need to pass H.C.R. 44, restore portrait monument. So there was an original citation on that monument that honored Black people, and they changed it. They need to change it back. They need to pass H.C.R. 94 to honor Mary McLeod Bethune. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think she was the first millionaire in the country. Maybe the first Black millionaire. I'm not too certain. They need to pass S.R. 179 and H.R. 345, which are very similar bills. So that's protecting the freedom of press, realizing that Black people across the country are blacklisted and not allowed to speak on the airwaves. They need to pass H.R. 640, condemning Christian persecution worldwide. Now that's just a statement. That's just a public statement. These people, hopefully they will mature enough to do these things. SR 274, they need to pass as well. And that's protecting organ harvesting. That is combating organ harvesting. It's protecting no organ harvesting and combating organ harvesting. And we have multiple examples of those things. So they need to pass H.R. 2121, 116th Congress, Stop Organ Trafficking Act. They should remove all Baphomet and Columbus statues. Columbus never discovered America. Satan no longer rules the earth. So Baphomet is unnecessary. Number 19, the freedom to pursue and bring to justice the culprits of slavery. Number 20, the immediate stay and release of political prisoner Mumia Abu-Jamal. Number 21, the immediate stay and release of Travis Cole due to coerced plea and lack of evidence. Before I go into what the applicants and the beneficiaries will be receiving from the administrators, I'd like to open up the floor. Okay, hearing none, I will continue to what the beneficiaries receive from the administrators. And that is, number one, tax exempt payments based on tax bracket. So you can find that on paragraph 9. Very clearly stated here that the lowest tax bracket will receive $51,500 per year. The lower to middle income taxpayers will receive $31,000 per year. The middle income adults will receive $25,000 per year. The upper to middle income will receive $20,000 per year. And the higher income, which is above $188,000 per year, will receive $15,000 per year. And this is per slave detected in their lineage. And per autochthonous Holocaust victim. Additionally, one-time $1 million loans will be issued to descendants of slaves at 0% interest per annum. All right. Start a video. Who needs to start a video? If you can unmute your mic and explain a little bit. Number 2, diplomatic immunity. And number 3, free healthcare, dental, and vision for life. Number 4, true primary sourced Black education year-round, right to travel. Oh, I get it. Right to travel. Where am I? Okay, right to travel and passports and driving. Number 6, new identification from Praise Salvation. That's the name of our nation. So we're a number of tribes coalescing to the nation of Praise Salvation. Number 7, Entrepreneur Conservation Corps. This is for work, play, study, and health. It's a special training company. We are lobbying the Spectacular Academy or other kind of like maybe Dr. Boyce Watkins, who will specially train in the field of entrepreneurship. Okay. Number 8, Officer Assistance Coalition. So this is our response to the retardation of the police. You understand? So I understand you, Ms. Pambelli, you said something about the, what was your solution for the police to disband them? Well, we're gonna need someone in place, I think, to continue policing our communities. However, they need special assistance on Black calls because they view us as the Incredible Hulk. You understand? So they have some unwarranted fear of Black people, if that makes any sense. Okay, so let me get back to here. Okay. And my favorite, as far as police reform, is mandatory officer drug testing, except undercover. You understand? So let me share my screen here, because I can't believe that people have been listening to that without reading along with me. Okay, so now, number 10, the Library of Congress gives the descendants of slaves and autochthonous Holocaust free lineage research indefinitely, whether remote or in person. We think that's important because according to William Darity, Professor William Darity, who was a professor at Duke University and the University of Chapel Hill simultaneously, gives us clear criteria for who should deserve reparations, who should be paid reparations, and that is a person who both is a descendant of slaves or descendants of the autochthonous Holocaust, and who has identified as Black for 10 years prior to a reparations program. So we think that's fair, and we have adopted his methodology for that particular piece. Up to $1 million loan to businesses at 0% interest, Black people. Because as people have understood, and as that money is a means to salvation, among other things. So behavior is your number one means to salvation. Self-determination is a additional means to salvation. And then you need money in order to build your self-determined spaces, you see. So number 12, let me check this message here. We got a message in the, if you could unmute your mic instead of sending messages, that would help me navigate. Okay, so I don't know what that was about. Okay, so number 12, lower corporate tax to 10% with 1% tax income applied to beneficiary employee checks. Now, the reason that this is important, right, is because all economists will tell you, intelligent economists will tell you that the lower the tax base is, the lower the tax percentage is, the more participation you receive in people paying, corporations paying tax. Okay, so then 1% of that should go to their employees. Is someone want to say something? Yeah.
Okay, so Miss Pam Valley was sending messages. She just said that one, as it relates to what you were asking earlier, one of her suggestions was to free all political prisoners. And as a member of Black August, we must all demand that all Black Panther party members held in prison be released now. So free Jamil Al-Amin as well, and dismantle the present prisoner industrial complex. She also stated that if you have ever been a socialist to socialist societies, they have community protection units and community and nation based by women and men. So those were the points that she wanted to put across.
Excellent points. And we understand that it is extremely difficult to release even one prisoner from prison because they're private companies, and that's a whole process in itself, right? So as far as releasing all prisoners and dismantling the prison industrial complex, we would not take the time to pursue that avenue without a civil war, because that's their culture, is to own slaves. So this is how the prison industrial complex exists. They conceded in the Civil War and said, how are we going to get slaves? Well, all you have to do is make everything that Black people do, say, and how they look illegal. They make their hair illegal, make walking across the street illegal, make them looking at you illegal, make them whistling at you illegal, make everything that a Black person does illegal. So therefore, you will continue to have own slaves. So we're trying to prevent the Civil War here, and we don't want to go that route, because that is a certain Civil War. Number 13, lower personal tax to 10% with 1% tax income applied to beneficiary taxpayer, the beneficiaries of reparations. Number 14, the federal government should legalize marijuana, then causing the immediate stay and release of non-violent drug offenders detached from RICO. So special guest with us, Dr. Kalo Black. And so whenever you go to this site, be certain on every page, now we remind you over and over again to fill out this petition. So what this petition does is allow this reparations program to administer reparations incorruptibly to our people. So we have a particular vested interest in our people. We happen to love our people, whereas others do not. And we need you to fill out this petition to allow us to administer the reparations to our people. Okay, so I want to open the floor to anyone at this time. So I want to introduce a special guest, Dr. Kalo Black, who decided to join us early for some reason. What brings you here a little early, brother? Can you unmute your mic? Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, no problem.
I just wanted to just see how my brothers was doing, to join and to just kind of rejoice a bit about the work that's being done earlier this morning, I was taken aback by a brother who was killed in California recently. So weeping beginning the Sabbath. So I just needed to uplift. So I appreciate this meeting of the minds of our people to kind of present, you know, the hard work that everybody has done collectively, and you know, it's just encouraging, especially during the Sabbath. When I started my Sabbath out, weeping about it. So, so thank you again for everybody who's here, and the presentation on all the hard work. And in the coming weeks, I will be doing some stuff that I think will solidify some of the actions, and then bring it over into areas of Ghana on the 6,000 acres that have been given to us to build a nation across the seas, so we can be working in parallel on this great work. So thank you so much. Thank you so much again for the work. It's uplifting.
Don't I feel the same? Yes. So as you already know, I am not doing this alone, and I don't even know the amount of assistance that I'm receiving. You understand? So that's uplifting to me. Now, if I could have Mrs. Hollingsworth take over for a moment, I need to take a break. I've been talking too much. So if you could open the floor to discussion, and then I'll return shortly. Are you still here, Miss Hollingsworth?
Yes, please, I am. So at this time, we'll open the floor for anyone who has any views or wants to comment on anything that would have been discussed to this point. So in terms of what was discussed as it relates to the compensation, does anyone have anything else to add that they think might be a good ask? Black?
I just wanted to throw something out there regarding a plausible avenue also that possibly we could have less resistance on as it pertains to assistance and reparations, or a revenue that extends beyond direct payments from the American government or the American taxpayer, similar to what has been going on in this trade war, leveraging a tariff on goods being brought into America as a possible means to add, similar to what was being said about certain taxes and portions of taxes. But what about tariffs as an avenue of less resistance to, as a means to collect reparations? Has anybody thought of that?
Yes, yes, that's an excellent question. So we didn't include it in this plan because the the Congress does not decide tariffs. So that's who our audience is for this particular piece. And higher tariffs cause a disruption in the market. So we're gonna have to talk about that with the economic arm, the CFO of the United States, on a different occasion, and we're gonna have to iron that piece out. So we haven't fully really understood it.
Yeah, I just wanted to offer that as a possible, unless with that process, I guess you would have less hoops to jump through than going through the whole legislative and getting the whole body to agree. I was just thinking as a way to, have a quicker response and possibly a less red tape and hoops to jump through. And it wouldn't take that much, different than how Trump compensated the farmers due to the trade wars and China not buying their products. And he gave them direct compensation out of the surplus or the tariffs that were being collected, by the Treasury from the payments of those tariffs being made by China on those products. And then he turned around and gave, if I recall correctly, $16 billion directly to the farmers without any legislation required to be passed. So that's the only reason why I mentioned that as a possible avenue. And it's just my thought. It's kind of like if you have multiple approaches, we have this way, we have this way, we have that way. Which one? In sales, they teach you, right? We have three options. Which one would you like to pick? But you got to pick one of them.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's why I invited them here to figure out how you want to do it, because you got to do it. And so now, is your avenue? I hate to plug this, man, but is your avenue similar to the Platinum Plan with Black America, or you got $500 billion allocated to Black businesses? That's a very recent phenomenon.
Right.
Today,
now,
today or yesterday.
It's similar. It would be similar because these are executive decisions, right? These are executive decisions, no different than Trump found the money to build the wall. It didn't come from the House. The House tried to block that, but he used money and leveraged it from the Department of Defense in order to build the wall. So it shows no different than the State Department. If you go into Ghana, the State Department or the embassy in Ghana actually has money set aside to fund different aspects and things within the Ghanaian community. Maybe spend millions on the festival or provide this money. It's almost like PR money. So it will come out of it would be budgeted, and the government or the president could submit a budget and those things be funded without necessarily going through the legislative arm. And I'm just saying that could be an avenue, no different than Ivanka having programs that focus millions upon millions of dollars overseas in other countries to try to build women businesses. Congress didn't pass a law to do that. They used that discretionary spending in order to fund those types of projects. So I think, of course, thought through, we could leverage that same approach and
right, as a starting
right,
point.
right,
Mm-hmm.
right, or
Get your foot
multiple,
in the
right?
door, right?
Yeah, to get as multiple options, and a tariff of a small sorts or a minimal amount adds up when you're having thousands and thousands of products coming into the environment, which wouldn't be a strain on the economy, however, could be factored in. Like Trump said, if you do a deal with me before my election, you have a better deal, but after the election, it's not going to be as sweet as the deal would have been before. But that deal and those trade talks, since we are the ones, our ancestors, who made the countries and the world wealthy, not just America, but world's governments wealthy, why wouldn't we be able to negotiate a small percentage as it pertains to that, a tariff or whatever you want to call it, an agreement? Like you would be able to negotiate that from other governments and say, hey, this is what we want to do as a reparations vehicle. Would you agree? And get governments to agree to this, and then that would be a lot easier than trying to get the body or the people or the House or the Senate to try to sanction something like this. So it's just another avenue possibly in order to negotiate, because I think no different than our plan. Okay, we have a plan of building in America different communities. Meanwhile, in parallel, we are building in Ghana, because that's just wise. It's a basic investment, right? You don't put all your eggs in one basket, you diversify.
That's right.
So having a diversified approach can only increase our percentage of success.
Absolutely.
So that's just my thought behind those kind of things.
Anybody else want to follow that brilliance? Hearing that, I'm going to move on to other people who have been extremely vocal about reparations here. And those are the beneficiaries of reparations. Okay, so Ice Cube, the Triple OG, he said the case for neo-reconstruction, let me get my camera on here. Excuse me.
I couldn't find that in your music.
You couldn't find it? What do you mean you couldn't find it? Hold on a second. How do I turn my camera on here? Go in here. Okay. Start sharing. Turn my camera on. Right. And then share again. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Now, let's get back to the reading. The case for neo-reconstruction. Neo-reconstruction is an aggressive initiative meant to redress past wrongs systematically imposed on Black Americans economically throughout many generations. Wrongs that have had a severe negative impact on African Americans, both economically and educationally. The specific case and plan for neo-reconstruction is presented later in the document. A commission will immediately be formed and empowered to quickly put the plan into action. Separately, a plan will also be devised to make Native Americans whole within the same timeline. Separately, in the same timeline, oh, I lost my place, okay. Black Americans will be compensated for the value of work contributed by their ancestors, while Native Americans will get back the true value or land promised to them in various treaties. For Black Americans to be eligible, they must provide documentation proving their descent from at least one enslaved person. So everyone seems to be agreeing on the recommendation of Dr. William Darity of Duke University and University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. 2 universities in North Carolina. Duke University is located in Durham. It's a private university. University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill is located in Chapel Hill, and it's a public university. They must also prove they have identified as Black or African American for at least 10 years prior to the institution of the reparations program. T.I. been extremely vocal about reparations and found out that the Lloyd's of London, which is a insurance company, was integral in the building of ships and insuring slaves, ensuring the Middle Passage, so that any slave lost, the shippers will be compensated. The shippers of humans will be compensated for their loss. So TIP is putting UK's Lloyd's of London on notice after the company acknowledged their involvement in the transatlantic slave trade. Hopefully that's understood. Ta-Nehisi Coates, a journalist for The Atlantic, wrote the second best case for reparations. He's a prophet, and we know that reparations must take place and will take place due to the understanding that America is repenting. They just need, as stated by Hillary Clinton, duties. They need for us to come together, say the same thing, and tell them what we want. So somehow this is not showing up properly. Read this story for free. Okay. Oh yeah, hurry up. Go ahead, Dr. Kalo Black.
Are you referring to the recent story how America gained 16 trillion if they would have addressed the wealth gap in Black America? Are you referring to that recent article?
No, I'm referring to revisits the case for reparations. So that is a follow-up to his case for reparations in 2015. So in 2019, after the frenzy and then the discussion in front of the Congress, he revisited the case.
So I just wanted to make a note that Kramer, who is an investor, you see him on those investor financial business like Fox Business. He actually was referencing an article, and we should look this up as and incorporate it in the case. How if they would have addressed the wealth gap 20 years ago, the American economy would have gained $16 trillion annually.
Exactly.
To their economy.
So they do have a converging interest. So one argument against reparations is that capitalism does not have a converging interest to repay us the damages, right? But you have just stated that they would have gained 16 trillion, and it's never too late.
That's right. So I'm definitely gonna try to find that article and send that to you.
Okay. So let me continue this reading here. We got Ta-Nehisi Coates, he's the man. Mashakari Jywanza of N-COBRA was the female co-chair of N-COBRA. And let's find out what she has to say.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Sister Starla Muhammad, managing editor of the Final Call newspaper, and it is my honor to be sitting here with Queen Mother Mashakari Jywanza.
Yes,
she is the female national co-chair of N-COBRA, and we are here coming to you from the 30th annual N-COBRA conference. And Queen Mother, first and foremost, for those of our viewers who may not be familiar with N-COBRA, can you explain who and what N-COBRA is and a little bit about your work?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And N-COBRA, of course, stands for the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. And we are a coalition. We encourage other organizations to join us, particularly those that have a reparations platform. And our work is to obtain full reparations for our people because it's due. It's a just demand, and we have been doing this work for over 30 years. But there were those who were before us as well.
Yes.
And so we're trying to carry on the legacy of Callie House, Queen Mother Moore, and educate our people to understanding and feeling.
So, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was Queen Mother Moore who coined the phrase descendants of slaves, or American descendants of slaves, with a focus on America. So that phrase was popularized by the United Nations whenever they deemed descendants of slaves a special people who deserve reparations.
The need to join this demand with us.
Talk a little bit, Queen Mother, about exactly what is reparations for some people who may think, well, is it just writing a check to black folks? I know it's a lot deeper and more complex than that and many layers to that, but for those who are maybe just now becoming familiar with reparations, and particularly over the last few months that it's kind of been in the news. Kind of talk about that a little bit.
Well, reparations is about repair and repairing our people. And, first you have to understand that there's a need for repair. So we encourage our people to learn your history and see what our ancestors have gone through. Our theme this year is 400 years of terrorism. And that's...
So now, before I say this, did you want to add, Doctor?
That was an accident. I just hit the button on that.
Okay, so repair puts me in the mind frame of healing. So we have a lot of mental healing to do in our community, right? People have gone through extreme mental anguish for their entire lives, okay? And so this should be understood by beneficiaries. This must be understood by beneficiaries. We don't expect an abuser to understand that they are abusing. So that is not our audience at all.
What we have been experiencing. Now, unfortunately, many of us are very comfortable, and I say that we are the most comfortable slaves in the world. And so a lot of times young people don't see that. A lot of young people are void of their history. That's because our school system does not.
So clearly, Sarnetta must have been the cameraman, because this is often a common mistake that he makes when he's filming. It's just erratically moving the camera.
Teach them their history, and that's one of the pillars of N-COBRA, is to have independent education and African-centered education. Because if you know who you are and what you've done, it really lays the path on what you need to do. And so we want young people to be able to know all that we have gone through, and to understand that, you know, we are the survivors.
Right.
We have survived a lot, and our young people don't know that.
Right. Exactly. And talk a little bit legislatively what's going on. Of course, we've got the...
So the youth, right, is the most political generation we've ever had. So they're definitely on board.
Two bills, if you can explain to people the two bills, the House, the Senate bill, kind of where things are standing.
Yes. Well, right here at this convention today, retired Congressman Conyers was here, and he had introduced many years ago H.R. 40. And upon his retirement, the bill was still there with very little action. And all of a sudden, and I have to tell you, sister, I have no idea what was the catalyst that brought all of this to the forefront, but it's here. And so now I believe our legislative commission was telling us in the board meeting, we have well over 67 co-sponsors. There were, and for those who don't know, when a bill is presented, you have to get those signatures every year. So, you know, you might get 5 this year, 10 this year. So this is the most we have ever gotten. And then there's a Senate companion bill. And Cory Booker has been so kind to introduce that. And so now we're working on the senators. And so we have been doing that for a while.
So as we all know, this is for your information, John Conyers died. And Sheila Jackson Lee took up the cause of H.R. 40. She's the champion. She's the queen. She needs our support.
A while, we're right here in Detroit, and John Conyers came into this from one of his friends, who we call Reparations Ray. And he was a realtor here in Detroit. He took hold of the reparations movement, and you know, him and Conyers, I don't know if it was over drinks or what, man, you need to do this, and he did. And we appreciate that. And of course, Reparations Ray is not with us anymore, but we still have that foundation that we're building on. And your guess is as good as mine how far we'll go with this. Hopefully, it'll go all the way. But then you bring up another issue. What then, or how then, do we use our reparations to repair our people?
Right. And how does America afford the bill? That's where our solution comes in at. because we are the only reparations movement who understands how America can afford to pay this. They can afford to pay it by the wealthiest bank in the earth, the New World Bank, that I like to call it. And so the New World Bank is the absolute wealthiest bank. They have bankrupted the old World Bank, who failed to get rid of poverty. The old World Bank thought that getting rid of poverty meant getting rid of the poor and coming up with every eugenics program that they could possibly imagine to eliminate the poor. Oh, we think that was retarded. We don't think that was the proper methodology to utilize to eliminate poverty from the earth. So the New World Bank has a different motive, and that is to give monies to the poor for the world sympathy and the world empathy that has been created by the blatant exposure of public lynchings. You understand? So let's continue. Bob Johnson. He founded BET that we all grew up on in my generation. He's a reparations expert. He publicly calls to, which went super duper viral, for $14 trillion in reparations for slavery. Well, it's impossible for the United States to pay those monies other than the earmarked $14 trillion in gold that Obama earmarked for an unknown purpose. And we had to logically conclude that those monies were earmarked for reparations, but they effectively went against everything he wanted to do, so that he did not have the time throughout the 8-year tenure to redress reparations. Dr. Claude Anderson is a little too ill to have made it here today. We are praying with an A for his speedy recovery. He's the only forensic historian in the entire country. Let's see what he has to say.
We are speeding. Okay, so first question is one that's I think was right up your alley. Why do black people deserve reparations? I know, basic question. Just wondering if you had the answer.
For obvious reasons. For after having been having been enslaved, formerly enslaved for 360 years, then semi-enslaved for another 100 years, then benign, neglected, politically corrected for another 50 years, then they obviously need to be need some form of reparations. And let's go back to the definition. What is reparation? Reparation means repairing the damage that has been done to black folk. Black folk have been emotionally, psychologically, physically, financially, and politically damaged for almost 500 years in this country. And someone needs to go back and be required to perform some restitution for those negatives and dangers and crippling effects that happened to black folk. That's never occurred. So black folk need to be compensated and for all those 500 years of Jim Crow segregation, and, as well as form of enslavement.
So what specific instances can you think of in history where black people have things taken from us that we deserve, opportunities denied to us, that will come up in a reparations conversation?
Well, that was the whole point of slavery. The whole point of slavery was the social engineer black folk in the lowest level of a real life monopoly game, and then to maldistribute almost 100% of of all this nation's resources, power, wealth, income, businesses, and controls of all levels of government into the hands of the dominant white society. And more specifically, it was done by the use of land. You see, because when this country was formalized, it set up a system for maldistribution, the control of land. When our first president, which was George Washington, at least I corrected that in one of my books, Black Labor, White Wealth, and Dirty Little Secrets. He was not really the first president, but let's say the official first president of the United States was George Washington. And when George Washington had approved the United States Constitution being ratified in 1789, the first thing he said is that I want 100,000 acres of free land. And that means in everything on that land, the timber, the gold, the silver, the chrome, the bauxite, the magnesium, gas, oil, whatever's on there. He got 100,000 acres of free land. Then when he said that, Thomas Jefferson followed suit and said, I want 100,000 acres of free land. He got 100,000 acres of free land. Then you had Patrick Henry, who said, give me liberty and give me death. He also said, give me some free land. He got 65,000 acres of free land. Now, and that constitutes the basis for most of the maldistribution of wealth and resources in this country. It's just using land as a basis. Because the immigration laws that came into effect 1 year later in 1790 set up what you call the American Dream. The American Dream was based on two things, free land and free black labor. And so every immigrant coming to this country was able to pick up 640 acres of free land just coming to the country through land rights and land grants and homesteading acts. And every slave they owned, they picked up 150 acres of free land. And then even when they set up the railroads across this country, when whites set up about 11 railroad lines, they got about 6 miles of free land on both sides of the railroad across the United States. So the 11 railroad lines picked up over 24 million acres of free land. And so in the final conclusion, whites picked up over 1 billion, with a B, not with an M, 1 billion acres of free land. And that meant that, and on that free land, that meant the timber, the land, the gold, the silver, everything of value. And that constituted the basis of wealth in this country for whites. That's why right now, from Boston or Connecticut all the way to San Diego, California, whites own and control almost 99% of all the wealth in this country. And then most of it was founded in the land. And yet by the same token, after whites got that 1 billion acres of free land, black folk couldn't get 1 acre of free land. And so that's why your wealth has been maldistributed. And the basis of it is land in this country.
So what you heard there was an interview by Dr. Boyce Watkins, who is a elder in the Friends of the African Union and a great economist, and can teach you how to make money. This is why we would be lobbying his expertise to train our populace on entrepreneurship should he accept it. And so what I noticed about that interview is that Dr. Claude Anderson continually laughed, because we have to laugh in order to prevent from crying. So his knowledge in this area is so vast that it's enough to make people violently mad. So we have to approach justice in a way that does not get our populace genocided. This is why we advocate civil war prevention. You understand? So let me move on to the next speaker that was invited here, the next beneficiary. Okay. And that wouldn't be. Okay, so we're moving on to the witnesses. Trevor Noah is a witness to our plight. His lineage survived apartheid in South Africa. And so let's listen to him.
You guys have any questions before we move on? Anything you want to chat about? No, we good? Yes, sir?
Do you think that like reparations should just go to like one like group, or like should it target like people that are in the same kind of like socioeconomic like group? Because
That's an interesting question. What do you mean by that? If I
well, like there are like white people that have like been disenfranchised like recently, like
recently is the key. Recently is the key.
The country like deindustrialized, right? So like a lot of people in like manufacturing jobs and stuff like
Right.
areas were affected.
But so to your question, I think you have to understand what the word reparations means first. So reparations, you are repairing something that you have broken. You are paying for something that you were supposed to pay for. I'm not saying that there aren't people living in America today who are suffering and are going through pain and strife because of what's happening when it comes to machines taking jobs, factories becoming industrialized, etc. But reparations is a specific conversation about a specific time in America, and that is black people were slaves. You know what I mean? I've even heard people say like, oh, but there were some of the Irish who were indentures. Like, yeah, slavery. Look at the numbers, look at the time, look at the level of work. You could not work toward your freedom. For most black people in America, this was a time when you lived and died as a slave. And so that's what reparations is about. And so I hear what you're saying, but I think that's a completely separate conversation that needs to be had about the now. Because if you are not careful, what you then do is you combine everybody's suffering into the same bowl, and you make it seem like all injustices have the same weighting, and they don't. It's just like crimes. You know, theft isn't the same as murder. We don't try them the same way. And as much as there is a white person who's suffering today, I feel for anybody who's suffering, because I know what it's like to be poor. I know what it's like to suffer. I didn't come from a wealthy family. We struggled when I was growing up. But I also understand that there are levels of that suffering. You know, and so sometimes white people, it does block a white person because you go white privilege, and a person goes, I'm poor and I'm white. Where's the privilege? You know, white people are like, I wish I could activate my white privilege. I wish I could do it right now. White privilege, give me something. I get that. I get that. Trust me, I get it. It is hard to accept that you have benefits because of the color of your skin if you cannot see the benefits that you have. But the thing I try to explain to a person is, think of it more like golf. Don't think of it as privilege, then think of it like a handicap. Right? In golf, they acknowledge that you are in a position where you need so many advantages to be competitive in the game. Right? So what they say is you have a handicap of 15, so that means like you're going to be hitting from this tee and you get more chances to get the ball in because we understand the position you're in. And if you're a black...
I wanted to pause it right there to just mention that humor is used as a coping mechanism. You understand? So he had to present it that way. Now he's already a comedian, that man. He's extremely funny. And so he had to bring the audience back into the information in this microwave society, in order to have them focus on the reality that he was expressing. You understand?
Black person in America, from slavery, from day one, the number of injustices that have held black people back in America amount to an insurmountable, like you look at black people's freedom, you look at black people's land, just land alone. The amount of wealth you can acquire over time if you own land is exponential, because you have the land, you have the fact that you can borrow based on the land, you have the fact that you can use the money that you have borrowed to grow more wealth, you can use it to grow your family's wealth. Just taking that away from black people alone is crippling them. And so you combine that with slavery, and then you look at Jim Crow laws. You didn't let black people in America live in the areas that they wanted to live in. They couldn't get loans from the banks that they wanted to get loans from. And then on top of that, when they started getting the loans from American banks were found to be giving them higher interest rates, when in fact they were the same risk as many of the other races that they were giving loans to. So when you combine all of those things, I think it's safe to say that black Americans have a conversation that they need to be having with the United States. Doesn't involve me, doesn't involve white people, it's like, yo, American government, meet the black people. That's it. Have that conversation.
Well, this is a major reason why we have invited America to this sentencing hearing. Okay? It's between America and the black people. Everybody else move out of the way. Should you be in our way, we would have to move around you in order to get to America. And again, in this reparations plan, the only reparation plan that solves the how will America pay, it will play with the richest bank. That's the only way. That bank is the only bank in the earth that can afford reparations. Okay? Also, moving forward, all right, before I go to the next witness, does anyone have any thoughts that's been on their mind? Okay, the next witness is Dr. Johnny Hunter. He's an abortion expert. African Americans leaders call for reparations to erase the past evils of slavery. July 13th, 2009. I am a national spokesman for LEARN, the organization that Dr. Johnny Hunter is the leader of. July 13th, 2009, in a new film, Ma'afa 21, by Mark Crutcher, several African American leaders calling for reparations appear to discuss the current situation of Black genocide, linking today's existing patterns of race selection and population control to the days of slavery in America. The film highlights modern-day funders of eugenics, linking them to companies that financed efforts to reduce or eliminate the Negro population at the time slavery was ending in America. That's exactly what their plan was, and they failed miserably, and they will pay. So this is Civil War prevention in order to preemptively pay via the richest bank in the earth so that you don't keep angering the Incredible Hulk. Because when the Incredible Hulk gets angry, things get torn to shreds, and it's very difficult to subdue the Incredible Hulk. So the subpoenaed defendants, right, were Donald Trump. I believe. Did we subpoena Donald Trump, Ms. Hollingsworth?
Yes, please.
Okay. And so he says here, the Hill.com Home News Administration exclusive Trump on reparations. He claims that he doesn't see it happening. The reason he doesn't see it happening is because there's not enough support in the Black community for reparations. They are not calling, they're not speaking the same thing. This should be the only thing they should be talking about. They should not be talking about the divorce between Cardi B and Offset. That should not even be a discussion. You see? The longer it takes for these things to happen, the more in jeopardy the Black community is. And this is how dozens of Black people were continually killed, murdered after George Floyd, which was the catalyst for the protests. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee out of Texas. We understand that she's the queen of HR 40 and is doing everything in her power to get it passed through Congress. Congressman Richard Hudson out of North Carolina. He speaks about police reform, if I'm not mistaken. But let's take a look at specifically what he says here. Promoting social mobility in the face of racial disparities. What are leaders doing?
Even in the middle of a pandemic, work is still underway in Kannapolis, part of a massive revitalization of downtown with a new baseball stadium, apartment complex, and retail space. Kannapolis is home to an opportunity zone, which city manager Mike Legg says helped seal the deal on some outside investment.
We had a really good opportunity for using opportunity zones because of our public investment we're making. It was a distressed part of our community.
Across North Carolina, there are more than 250 opportunity zones, low-income areas where tax breaks aim to stir investment that may not happen otherwise. The concept, which had supporters from both parties on Capitol Hill, was included in the massive tax overhaul passed by Congress in 2017. Representative Richard Hudson views the zones as one avenue to help alleviate racial and economic disparities.
The idea behind these opportunity zones is let's go to underserved communities that aren't getting the same types of investment as other places.
But the zones are not without their critics. Some worry they contribute to gentrification, and recent studies have raised questions about whether they're actually achieving their mission. For his part, Legg argues the opportunity zone-backed development in Kannapolis is a long-term play.
This is one situation where I'm not sure that we can pinpoint specific advantages to our low to moderate income community, but I think it's one of those rising tide floats all boats situations where I think having a good solid downtown core I think can benefit with spinoff effects for everybody.
The death of George Floyd has renewed focus on another idea, one that supporters argue could dramatically help address disparities: reparations. But while Congress shows no signs of acting, some smaller communities are. The concept of reparations has floundered on Capitol Hill for decades. But while the idea may now be getting more attention, including a hearing last year, the Republican leader of the Senate has made his opposition clear.
I don't think reparations for something that happened 150 years ago for whom none of us currently living are responsible is a good idea.
Without action in Washington, though, some communities are moving on their own. Asheville, North Carolina grabbed national headlines last month when the city council there approved a resolution, both supporting reparations and apologizing for the city's role in discrimination.
The days of incremental change, I believe, have left us. And in the now, we require what I believe is to be institutional change to move forward.
While the word reparations may
I'm glad they edited that clip into the scene because that says it exactly. Tiny changes are behind us. We need drastic change. You understand? So us having a sentencing hearing without objection has effectively caused that drastic change. So there being no objections to this plan gives us a superior footing with the New World Bank as we present our financial plan to the New World Bank.
conjure up ideas of direct payments to African Americans, this plan is not that. Instead, it calls for making investments to help tackle racial disparities and promote generational wealth in the black community. A commission will be tasked with coming up with recommendations. Councilwoman Julie Mayfield notes, though, that these sorts of societal changes are not something they can do alone.
It calls on the federal and state governments to take the same step and to make similar investments. This is, I think, in most everyone's view, a national debt and a national need to atone for what has happened.
A national debt that the events of 2020 have forced the country to reckon with. In Washington, Kevin Fry, Spectrum News 1.
So that's obvious information that has been accepted by multiple levels of governing. So we don't expect any type of problems in approaching the New World Bank. The only problems that I can foresee is Black people who don't want this to happen, and racist white people that the government has deemed national threats. Okay, another defendant that we subpoenaed was Senator Thom Tillis, and without objection, he agrees with reparations. GOP Senate candidate, welfare is basically slavery reparations. That's pretty funny. So he clearly disagrees with reparations. When the North Carolina State Assembly set out to pass a resolution in 2007 expressing the body's regret for its participation in the institution of slavery, conservatives objected on the grounds that Black North Carolinians would use it to advance the cause of reparations. Wow. What's wrong with that? Go ahead.
Just to remind you, that particular article is from 2014, so it would be good to see if there have been any updates in his views as it relates to the reparations as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Republican Assemblyman Thom Tillis, who is now challenging Democrat Ray Hagan for her U.S. Senate seat, sought to allay those conservatives' concerns by flipping the argument. Reparations already exist in the form of welfare programs, he noted. And Republicans would be better positioned to oppose them if they purchased some goodwill with conservative Democrats by acknowledging that the legacy of slavery isn't just a liberal fiction. Oh man, that's pretty funny. It's pretty funny. But they spoke the words, you understand? So they know that it exists. They have not objected to our plan whatsoever. Not in the least bit. Senator Chuck Schumer out of New York. He is a subpoenaed defendant. President of America bill on slavery reparations gains backing from Senator Chuck Schumer. So that headline summed it up very well. I'm glad they did. Poison of America bill on slavery reparation gains backing from Senator Chuck Schumer. So that's very important. Very important indeed. And then we have one of my favorites that I hate did not come and voice his support for this particular plan because they have their own plans in the works. So I suppose that could be why he did not show up, you understand? But it's still without objection to our plan, and that's period, point blank. Actions taken by Mayor Greg Fischer and others. Recent public safety actions. These are substantial changes, but they are not enough because Black Americans dying at the hands of law enforcement has been happening for centuries. And to really address structural and systemic racism, you have to reform the structures and the systems. That's Mayor Greg Fischer, he said it. Working with protesters, law enforcement, and community members, Mayor Fischer and others have taken the following actions. LMPD, PIU investigations to provide independent oversight, AG, KSP, FBI, and Department of Justice reviewing LMPD investigation, FBI and DOJ conducting additional independent investigations. No-knock warrants are banned. Mayor suspended no-knock warrants, then signed Breonna's law to formally ban their use. Well, congratulations. So at the expense of our people, you finally realized how terrible an idea of a no-knock warrant is. Body cameras required. Mayor signed Breonna's law requiring body camera usage and execution of all search warrants. Officer Hankinson was fired. As a result of his conduct in the Breonna Taylor case, LMPD Officer Brett Hankinson was fired by acting LMPD Chief Schroeder. The Kentucky Public Corruption Civil Rights Task Force is investigating sexual assault allegations against Hankinson. Strong independent civilian police review. Mayor Fischer and Metro Council established a work group to recommend the best model for independent civilian review board with subpoena power to bring greater accountability and transparency. In addition, the FY21 budget, fiscal year 2021 budget, provide funding for a new office of Inspector General to support the work of the Civilian Review Board. Now, does that sound familiar? Does that sound anything like our clear compensation, where we have a unit that assists radical police officers in their visitations to Black calls? And that would be the Officer Assistance Coalition. Comprehensive LMPD review. Mayor hired Chicago-based consulting firm Hillard Heintze. You see? You know, they gotta involve the mob somehow to perform a top-to-bottom review of LMPD. Tear gas policy changed. LMPD policy changed to require chief or designee to sign off on the use of tear gas. Duty to intervene policy changed. LMPD policy changed regarding an officer's duty to intervene in the event he or she sees a fellow officer using excessive force. You see? So people are working on it throughout the country. It's just that Black people are unaware of this work. And they are so busy trying to survive that they are too busy to assist in this work. And last but least of the defendants that we subpoenaed and who have not objected is Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. Why not now? For Slavery Reparations House panel is told Congress holds hearing on reparations for descendants of slaves. So I think we're all very familiar with that hearing in front of Congress with Danny Glover and Ta-Nehisi Coates, Senator Cory Booker, and a whole star cast of reparations experts. So I want to open the floor and don't forget that you could have intervened any moment while I was presenting. I hope that's understood. Okay, hearing none, what I want to do now is hand it over to my illustrious administrator of this meeting to tell us what to do next. How should we proceed? I'm pretty sure I know, but I want you to guide the closing of this.
Okay, so, well, at this point we're going to be looking at the Treaty of Salvation Agreement, and then we'll be looking for a closing remark.
Okay, treaty. All right, let's get there. Bear with me as I pull up the treaty. Treaty. Okay. Okay, just bear with me here. Let's see. Final case, Reparations. The treaty is here. Would you happen to have the treaty with you? Miss Hollingsworth?
No, please.
Say again?
No, please.
You say you do?
No, I don't have it.
Okay, treaty should be here.
Mr. Black, I noticed that you had your mic off a little earlier. Is there something you wanted to say while the bar gets treaty up?
Okay, so the Treaty of Praise Salvation is the treaty detailing the sentencing of the sentencing for reparations, the final case and sentencing for reparations against the United States who have inherited the debt of these atrocities. And so without objection, they agreed to these things. So that is the standing treaty that we will be presenting to the New World Bank, as I like to call it, in the pursuit of the funds, the funding portion of the sentencing. And so it's not actually, I can't particularly find it right at this moment, but that's what it is. So it's kind of like for the bank's eyes only, and for the eyes, the particulars are, the details are for the eyes of the Congress and the President of the United States and the bank who's going to be funding their debt. So it's not particularly, I suppose that's why I didn't log it here properly, because it's not particularly for public consumption. Okay, so without objection, we're going to allow a continuance to the defendants for 30 days. Until then, we're going to continue discussing this on a weekly basis with our coalition. And until then, we are dismissed. Any final words from anyone before I end the broadcast? Okay, hearing none. Let me go ahead and end it. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you so much. Special thanks to Ms. Hollingsworth, who guided such a fantastic meeting. Special thanks to tech support Dane Longden for keeping us on air and keeping the sound working properly. Special thanks to Dr. Kalo Black for showing up and explaining his expertise. And he is the CFO of this project. A special thanks to General Yashar Yaosharal, who is the general of our militia. Special thanks to
Shalom, family.
Yeah, shalom. Special thanks to Brother Yanai Biasharala, who has the detailed logistical program for the use of the land that we have essentially secured at this moment. And is that right? Oh, special thanks to Miss Pambella. I forget her first name.
Missouri.
Okay. Great. So for coming through and expressing her vast knowledge on this information. And so we look forward to working with anyone who has the expertise to amplify this message so that the public can put pressure on their politicians to get these things passed through the Congress. And we're going to be exploring other avenues that seem more expedient to us, executive orders and so forth and so on. You understand? So we're in the platinum plan. I guess that would be a good time to bring that up, since that's hot off the press. Okay, so Trump unveils platinum plan for Black Americans. That just happened 22 hours ago, wherein he wants to allocate $500 billion platinum plan for Black America. Suppose that will be an executive order. I'm not too certain. And let's read about it. Yesterday, President Donald Trump speaks at a campaign event at the Cobb Gallery Center yesterday in Atlanta. Okay. President Donald Trump unveiled a plan aimed at winning over Black Americans on Friday, less than 2 months before Election Day, largely expanding upon the existing economic-related initiatives the president established in his first term. The proposals include prosecuting the Ku Klux Klan and Antifa as terrorist organizations, making Juneteenth a federal holiday, and efforts to bolster Black economic prosperity. So this is an interesting plan. So plans are not law, and so this should tell you how powerful your vote is, because people want us to vote for them. You understand? And so, but what's even more powerful than voting is getting laws passed. That's the purpose of voting. The voting is the very last step in the process. And then up until voting, you should be performing lobbyist activities wherein you're trying to get your agendas passed to reallocate the funds to your community, just as stated by Hillary Clinton in that 1-minute clip with Black Lives Matter, who was not prepared to tell her what their agenda is. But we are.
So I see that as a perfect opportunity. Once our plan, the financial plan is intact, I think that's a perfect opportunity to petition the government and lobby the government.
You see? You see? It's all what people don't understand, right? Is that God is real, and he orchestrates things so that the people who are supposed to do something at a certain time is able to do it. So he opens the pathways and so that those people can make it happen. So any sleeper cell that's pressed and woken up and gone into the public sphere in order to hinder the efforts of the people allocated to make this happen can never be successful. You understand? So what I encourage everyone listening to do is to go to blackredeem.me. First, sign this petition. When you sign this petition, donate $10,000 to our efforts, because we need to amplify this message so that it reaches the public sphere and they can call and jam the phones of the politicians to get this passed. The most effective, comprehensive reparations plan that addresses the how America can afford it. And $50,000 a year is nothing to sneeze at. It's not free money. It's our money. Our ancestors earned it. They were tortured and mutilated for it. So I want to thank everybody for coming out again. And I'm signing off.